Let's say the sequential operating process, the sequence of actions that are performed to create and control the processes of its quality management system. So it's like these are the sequences. Now, these are things which we have already seen in the earlier slides, but the same steps have been given in a sequence. So the steps in the process approach. The first step in the process approach is, define the context of the organization. Here, what we usually do, the organization should identify its responsibilities, the relevant interested parties, and the relevant requirements and needs and expectations to define the organization's intended purpose. Now, if you will see, we have already seen earlier in the previous slide of PDCA cycle that all the clauses, they come under plan to check and act process. So the same thing is given over here uh, in the same PDCS cycle. So this is in the plan phase where we gather, analyze, and determine external and internal responsibilities of the organization to satisfy the relevant requirements, needs, and expectations of the relevant interested parties. And we also monitor or communicate frequently with these interested parties to ensure continual understanding of their requirements, needs, and expectations. Then we define the scope, objectives, and policies of the organization. So, what to do in this? Based on the analysis of the requirements, needs, and expectations, establish the scope, objectives, and policies that are relevant for the organization's quality management system. The organization shall determine the scope, boundaries, and applicability of its management system, taking into consideration the internal and external context uh, and interested party requirements. Decide which markets the organization should address. Top management should then establish objectives and policies for the desired outcomes. Then we determine the process in the organization. Determine the process needed to meet the objectives and policies and to produce the intended outputs. Here, the management shall determine the processes needed for achieving the intended outputs. These processes include management resources, operations measurement, analysis, and improvement. Then we determine the sequence of the processes. So here we determine how the process flows in the sequence and interaction. Here we define and describe the network of the processes and their interaction. In that we consider the following below inputs. So the input and outputs of each processes, which may be internal or external process interaction interfaces on which processes depend or enable optimum effectiveness and efficiency of the sequence, then risks to the effectiveness of process interaction. After that, we define people or remits who take process ownership and accountability. So here we assign responsibilities and authorities for each process. So the top management should organize and define ownership, accountability, individual roles, responsibilities, working groups, remits, authority, and ensure the competence needed for the effective definition, implementation, maintenance, and improvement of each process and its interactions. Then we define the need for documented information. Here we determine those processes that need to be formally defined and how they are to be documented. So processes exist within the organization. They may be formal or informal. There is no catalog or list of processes that have to be formally defined. The organization should determine which processes needs to be documented on the basis of risk-based thinking, including, for example, the size of the organization and its type of activities, the complexity of its processes and their interactions, the criticality of the processes. So these are the things which we keep it in our mind. Then we define the interfaces, risks, and activities within the process. Here we determine the activities needed to achieve the intended outputs of the process and risks of unintended output. Also, we define the required outputs and inputs of the process, determine the risks, conformity of product, services, and customer satisfaction if unintended outputs are delivered. Determine the activities, measures, and inherent controls required to transform the inputs into the desired outputs. Determine and define the sequence and interaction of the activities within the process. Determine how each activity will be performed. Then we define the monitoring and measurement requirements. So determine where and how monitoring and measuring should be applied. This should be both for control and improvement of the processes and the intended process output. Determine the need for recording results. Then identify the validation necessary to assure effectiveness and efficiency of the process and system. Take into account such factors as monitoring and measuring criteria, reviews of performance, interested party satisfaction, supply performance, on-time delivery and lead times, failure rates and wastes, process costs, incident frequency, other measurements of conformity with requirements. Then we implement the same, that is as per the do uh, part in PDCA cycle. Here we implement actions necessary to achieve planned activities and results. The organization should perform activities, monitoring measures, and controls of defined processes and procedures, outsourcing, and other methods necessary to achieve planned results. Here we define the resources needed, determine the resources needed for the effective operations of each process. Examples of resources include human resource, infrastructure, environment, information, natural resources, materials, financial resources, and so on. So these are the things which we determine and define in a document. Then verify the process against its planned objectives. Confirm that the process is effective and the characteristics of the process are consistent with the purpose of the organization. This is a part of check in PDCA cycle. So the organization should compare outputs against objectives to verify that all the requirements are satisfied. Processes are needed to gather data. Examples include measurement, monitoring, reviews, audits, and performance analysis. Finally, we have verify the process against its planned objectives, which is the part of ACT, which is the final part of PDCA cycle. Here we change the processes to ensure that they continue to deliver the intended outputs. Act on the findings to ensure improvement of process effectiveness. Problem solving and improvement typically follows the essential steps of define the problems of objectives, collect and analyze the data on the problem and relevant process. Then we verify the process against its planned objective or objectives. Change the processes to ensure that they continue to deliver the intended outputs. Select and implement the preferred solutions. Evaluate the effectiveness of solutions. Incorporate the solutions into the routine.